Good morning. Good. All right. Let's go to God in prayer before we begin our study this morning in Job. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your grace and your mercy toward us and your goodness toward us. We thank you for the marvelous gift and the giving of your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you for what that brings to us as your people. We thank you for your tenderness toward us. And we pray now that we will have clean hearts and joyful minds as we receive your word. Please be with all those who may be suffering, all those who may be getting over incidents in this life or difficulty with their health. We pray that you'll bless us. And we also pray for those who are spiritually struggling, that your grace may shine upon their lives through us as your people. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, we are in Job. Now that's not the surprising part, but chapter 15 is where we're going to be. Job chapter 15. So go ahead and be turning your Bibles there. Job, the 15th chapter. And we had come through Job's response to some of the previous things that we have heard from some of his, quote, friends, I guess, or those who profess to be his friends, as they were offering their speeches. And Job comes back, and we had a pretty lengthy speech there from Job in Job chapter 14. Job talks about his vindication in chapter 13, or at least some hope of vindication in the future because of his innocence. And do you remember Eliphaz? We kind of began with Eliphaz. Well, he's going to come back and offer his speech here in Job chapter 15. Now, here's the thing about these speeches by Job's friends. Once you get through the first cycle, you feel like it's just, them repetitively saying the same type of thing. So let me try to illustrate some of the problems with that. Now, there are some things they go on to say, but it seems like pretty much the same speech over and over. They may intensify in their speeches. They may become, Eliphaz comes to sound kind of like Bildad, who was very, upfront with things. But it's kind of like if you're listening to a discussion and somebody presents a line of argumentation and somebody else wants to respond to that. All right, that's fine. They offer their initial response. But then the original party comes back and they give more argumentation that is somewhat substantive. And the party that now is to respond to them again doesn't give anything new, doesn't address really what is at the heart of what has been said. They just keep saying the same stuff over and over. That becomes frustrating for the hearer. So if you're reading through Job and you go, man, they're just saying the same stuff over and over and over again, I think it's because that's all they know to say. And what they know to say is what we're calling the system or retribution theology. That's all they know to say. And by retribution theology, of course, the idea that the righteous are blessed, the wicked will be punished. And of course, we've talked about that. There is a sense in which that is the case ultimately, but it doesn't always work out that way here, right now. So, that's kind of what's going on. So even as we read through Eliphaz, you're going to go, man, this sounds familiar. And so we're going to move through him pretty quickly, and all the speeches of the friends. I do want to focus on Job's speech, though, because while it's not necessarily completely new information, there are some new things. But it does seem to very much go deeper and intensify, and you really continue to hear his raw emotion come out and how he feels. And there's some interesting things. So we noticed some statements we had to look at in chapter 13, chapter 14. We'll see one again in chapter 16 that we'll kind of have to evaluate in chapter 19. Will be more that you may think, well, I've read that, but I don't know that I thought about it in the context. So here in chapter 15, what I would like to do, and I know this is a lengthy chapter, but I would like to take, 10 verses apiece until the fourth person, and then you'll get 5. Okay? So I want us to be able to hear all of this together. So, Chapter 15, those first 10 verses, who would take that for me? Joel? Kimberly, the next 10 verses? Let's see, that leads me to Mike, the third set of 10 verses, and then the last 5. You got it, Dino. Okay, so everybody knows where you are. I've already forgotten. So go for it.
Then Eliphaz the Temanite responded, "Should a wise man answer with winged knowledge, fill himself with the east wind? If he argue with useless talk, or with words which do not profit him? Indeed, you do away with reverence and hinder meditation before God. For your guilt teaches your mouth, and you choose the language of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I, and your own lips testify against you. Were you the first man to be born, or were you brought forth before the hills? Do you hear the secret counsel of God, and limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that we do not? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father."
Are the consolations of God too small for you, and the words spoken gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away, and what do your eyes wink at? That you turn your spirit against God, and let such words go out of your mouth? And what is man that he could be pure, and he who is born of a woman that he could be righteous? If God puts no trust in his saints, and the heavens are not pure in his sight, how much less man who is abominable and filthy, who drinks iniquity like water? I will tell you, hear me. What I have seen I will declare, what wise men have told, not hiding anything received from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, and no aliens passed among them. The wicked man writhes with pain all his days, and the number of his years is hidden from the oppressor.
Good.
Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer comes upon him. He does not believe that he will return from darkness, for a sword is waiting for him. He wanders about with dread, saying, "Where is it?" He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Trouble and anguish make him afraid. They overpower him like a king ready for battle. For he stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with his strong embossed shield. Though he has covered his face with his fatness and made his waist heavy with fat, he dwells in desolate cities and houses which no one inhabits, which are destined to become ruins. He will not be rich, nor will his wealth continue, nor will his possessions overspread the earth. He will not depart from darkness. The flame will dry out of his branches, and by the breath of his mouth he will go away.
Let not him that deceiveth trust in vanity, for vanity shall be recompassed. It shall be accomplished before his time, and his branch shall not be green. He shall shake off his unripe grape as the vine, and shall cast off his flower as the olive. For the congregation of hypocrisy shall be desolate, and the singing tabernacles of riot. They conceive mischief and bring forth vanity, and their belly prepareth deceit.
Okay, thank you. I know that's a lengthy reading. Let's go through and think about what are you hearing when you read through that speech? What are some of the major things you hear? They should sound somewhat familiar to you. Anybody?
There's the sense of what makes you so special that you know more about this than we do.
Right.
Apparently, they are older than Job is, and they're taking offense at his perceived evil.
Right. Okay. And there's something to what Joel was saying. We'll come back to it, but that's good. Anything else? What else do you hear or feel when you read or think? Go ahead, Bill.
Basically, that man is filthy.
Mm-hmm.
That we can't be righteous in any way, and then just that idea. What do you know other than what's been revealed or shown to us? You have some grand insight that we don't have.
Mm-hmm. Let's take that up for a minute. There is a real theme here of the filthiness of humanity the sinfulness of mankind. Well, is there a sense in which we know that's true? Yeah. There's truth that mankind overall has been filthy and sinful and rebellious. And there are multiple passages that say that very thing. So it's not that that statement itself is untrue, okay? But again, we keep coming back to this. It is wrong in its application to Job. So basically what they're doing is they're taking the principle that mankind overall has been sinful or rebellious historically, and they're saying you have no right to defend your own integrity in any sense. You have to be wrong. Okay? We have to be right because you're saying that you haven't sinned. Well, there's a difference in saying I haven't sinned in this particular regard. I've not been rebellious against God, and saying I have never ever sinned. So is Job saying he's never ever sinned? No. He's just saying he has integrity before God. So their presupposition, again, comes back in. Now, to both Billy's point and I think something Joel brought up, not only do they mention us, but they appeal to what? They appeal to tradition. They appeal to what we've always thought. They appeal to, are you smarter than our fathers were? And that kind of thing. And so that's something else. When I say tradition, I mean, in their mind, historically, what we've understood to be the case. And probably what Job would have understood to be the case prior to all of his experiences, right? So there's that. So they're appealing to tradition. What do they say about Job's words? Look there again in 15:1-3. Should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill himself with the east wind? Should he argue with useless talk or with words which are not profitable? So initially they're just saying your words are what? Worthless. They're empty. No, they don't address what is worth. They don't really address the actual argument. They don't meet his words where they are. They just say it doesn't fit with what we think. Your words are empty wind. Why should we even have talked to you about this? Okay, that's kind of how they're saying. Alan?
I think it's similar to the idea of you're full of hot air.
Yeah. That's what they're saying. Is you're full of hot air. Okay. Go ahead, Roger.
And it's like you said at the beginning. They will not abandon their belief that the good only are given rewards and only the bad are punished. So Job, on that theology, you've done something.
Right. And they refuse to entertain anything else, right? Yeah. That's right. So initially, now it gets, they're going to intensify a little bit, but initially they're saying, hey, your words are empty. But not only do they think his words are empty, look at verse 4. Indeed, you do away with reverence, and the New American Standard says, and hinders meditation before God. Does anybody have any different rendering of verse 4? I didn't really check the...
Yes, you cast off fear and restrain prayer before God.
Huh, that's interesting. Calvin.
Yes, he says that you are doing away with the fear of God, but it notes that of God is not in the Hebrew.
Okay, that's right. So that's what I was trying. So it's not, but it's implied. So that's why they put it in there, because it wouldn't be fear of anything else. So actually what they're saying, and I think fear of God and prayer is a little bit better for us to understand what they're really trying to say. The Hebrew word there's a little ambiguous, but even if you think of meditation, that's the notion of fearing God. Pray. That's why you have prayer a little bit. Prayer to God, reverence to God. So they're not only saying your words are empty, but they are saying that you are irreverent before God. Okay, so, you have to be wrong because in their minds, and this is what you have to remember, any questioning of the system that they understand to be the case is they're equating that to irreverence before God. Now we know in reality God doesn't perceive it that way. But that's what happens. We lock into our idea and everything has to fit our idea. And if it doesn't fit our idea, then you're being irreverent. Well, you need to figure out, is it truth in an absolute way or am I misapplying truth? And that's the issue we have going on here. Who had your hand up? Alan, go ahead.
I think too, by Job's expression breaks down their rationale of that the wicked will suffer in this life. And so by doing so, they're taking, Job's argument is taking away one of the arguments against sin, that you will suffer in this life if you're unrighteous.
Right.
I think that's part of their concern, is that you are breaking down the barriers or the negative consequences of sin.
Let's go a little further, because that's right on the negative side. On the positive side, and you need to understand why this would make them uncomfortable. Because on the positive side, they, in their minds, know they are righteous before God. Why?
Blessed.
They're blessed. Well, Job's whole reversal of this thing says you may not be as righteous as you think you are. Okay, so he's unwrapping their whole package. So there is a level, they keep talking about God, but you have to wonder, is this about God? I mean, they've convinced themselves that it is, but is it about defending God, or is it defending your view of God because it defends your own self-righteousness a little bit? And Job threatens all of that. I mean, Job, you talk about reversing and unwrapping everything. Job presents a threat to them in their viewpoint. Okay. Does anybody have your hand up? Oh, Dino, go ahead.
This is a good application for us today. When we look at somebody who's sinning, we just look at them. This person is going to be hard to help, hard to understand. You just almost condemn him right off the top. It's not that sin that might be the issue. It might be an underlying sin that this person is acting out because of a deeper
problem.
And that's
Right.
not what Job's friends are saying. They're just saying
That's right.
they condemn as they don't realize what's going on behind the scenes.
Right. Right.
We need to not act like friends. We need to dig a little deeper and find out what the root cause is before we help somebody.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. And we've seen, on that point, Job says about his friends, what kind of comforters does he think they are? Not good. So, even if you're going to, and I've thought this through, and we've talked about this, but even if you're Job's friends, even if you think he's on dangerous ground, okay, even if you can see all that, still you would think we go, no, let's really try to listen carefully. I don't know that you just completely dismiss, because there's not really any true dialogue going on. It's kind of one-sided, and that's a valuable point. Billy?
Well, to me, one of the things that it's more than them saying your words are empty. What they should say was, and it makes me very mad that you're saying that. I think you're arrogant. I think you're a false teacher. It's almost like once they have that mindset, they can't hear what he's saying.
Yeah. And they're going to go on and say all that stuff too. Yeah.
See what
Right.
pain, what confusion,
Right.
I just want them to know I'm getting mad now.
Yeah, we talk about Job's emotion, but their emotion is coming out. It's intensifying, and it's not a good way to express itself. Okay, so your words are empty. I think they're saying in verse 4, your words are dangerous. You're being irreverent before God. Verses 5 and 6, and remember we talked about a lot of the very things they accuse Job of, they're actually guilty of. In verses 5 and 6, he says, for your guilt teaches your mouth, and you choose the language of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. That's pretty self-righteous. And your own lips testify against you. And so they're saying, look, the reason you're even making these arguments is to make yourself feel better. It's obvious you should feel bad about your own sin, and you won't. You won't let go. So your words are empty. Your words are dangerous. Your words are self-justifying. They go further and say, and also you're arrogant on top of all of this by even making these arguments. Verse 7, were you the first man to be born? Or were you brought forth before the hills? Do you hear the secret counsel of God and limit wisdom to yourself? Which is, again, interesting because that kind of feels like what they're doing as well. Verse 9, what do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that we do not? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. So let's get back to what Joel was talking about. We have people that are much older than you are, and you're just going to throw all of their counsel out the window. So there's that. They say your words are hurtful. Look at verses 11 through 13. Are the consolations of God too small for you? Even the words spoken gently with you. Why does your heart carry you away? And why do your eyes flash that you should turn your spirit against God and allow such words to go out of your mouth? And they go on to say some other things. And then verses 14 through 16, they say you're unrealistic. Verse 14, what is man that he should be pure, or he who is born of a woman that he should be righteous? Behold, he puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one who is detestable and corrupt, man who drinks iniquity like water. But now they're righteous. Right. And they know they're righteous. How?
They're not suffering like this.
They're not suffering like Job. Okay, it's like this, you talk about circular reasoning. And with circular reasoning, you have certain things somebody assumes to be true, but they haven't really proven, that it's true. They can't demonstrate that it's necessarily true. It's their presupposition, okay? And everything's built on that. So you have maybe 2 or 3 major presuppositions and you go around. To give you an example, if you were studying with a Mormon, and I brought this up before, and they say, listen, the Book of Mormon is true. Well, how do I know the Book of Mormon is true? Because Joseph Smith said it was. Well, how do I know Joseph Smith is a true prophet of God? Because the Book of Mormon says he is. Okay, that's circular reasoning. You haven't demonstrated either of those things in an objective way. Well, we can see that with that notion, but sometimes we kind of reason that way about God. Our interpretation of God. The only way, now we're benefited because we do have revelation of God's truth. But what we see in that revelation is that God is multidimensional and that He's not stuck in just one paradigm of operation. He's much more diverse and beautiful than that. So you can see the problem. Does somebody have their hand up? Oh, go, Roger.
Back in verse 9, they are asking the question, what do you know that we don't know? They're asking it from the wrong perspective. Job does know something they don't know.
Yeah.
Is that he is righteous. But they refuse to take that, what he's telling them, and realize, well, maybe you are right, Joe. Maybe there's something we're missing here. They fail to look at their own selves and what they believe. And so when you accept a system or a belief that's not true, and a lot of people do in this world, in their religious beliefs, it's hard sometimes to make them stop and realize that, hey, look, maybe what I'm thinking isn't right.
That's true. That's right. That's good. Okay, so if we just break down Eliphaz, Job's words to him are empty, they're dangerous, they're self-justifying, they're arrogant, they're hurtful, they're unrealistic. In verses 17 through 19, he appeals to tradition once again. He says, I will tell you, listen to me, and what I have seen I will also declare. What wise men have told and have not concealed from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, and no alien passed among them. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days. He goes on to describe, the fears of the wicked. And basically he says, look, there are wicked people that suffer. And there are wicked people that have pain. And this is what it looks like to be wicked. And Job, it looks like you. Okay. And so that's just how he's going to continue to argue. So he appeals to tradition, fears of the wicked, and then the fate of the wicked. We won't read all of it, but verses 25 through 35, he talks about the wicked. And what he says about the wicked certainly has shown itself to be true on many occasions. But again, the problem here is, when they asked Job, it's interesting, what they asked Job is, what do you know that we don't know? What is being revealed in Job, the big question is, what is there about God that they don't know? There's your bigger question. Okay, so that's chapter 15, and we're about to get into chapter 16. It feels very familiar territory to me when I read through that, based on what we've read from the friends before, and they'll continue to argue this without really considering, I think, truly what Job is doing. But we're going to get into chapter 16 and get into Job's speech now. Does anybody have a question you feel like we missed or something? Okay, so let's get into chapter 16. And I'm going to pick up here with verse 1. And in my notes, I entitled this, Drinking the Cup of God's Wrath. Because, they're basically saying God's pouring Himself out on you in wrath What would Job say to that? Would he deny that God is pouring his wrath out on him? No. But he would deny he's doing it because Job has been unfaithful. Okay. So let's read together. Verse 1. Then Job answered, I have heard many such things. Sorry comforters are you all. Is there no limit to windy words, or what plagues you that you answer? I too could speak like you. If I were in your place, I could compose words against you and shake my head at you. I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips could lessen your pain. If I speak, my pain is not lessened. And if I hold back, what has left me? Okay, so let's talk through, what does Job say to their windy words argument and all the things that they've said first of all? Okay, first, yeah, you're sorry comforters. I mean, what you've said hadn't helped me one bit.
It's easy for them not suffering to sit there and lecture him. Job's miserable.
Right.
I think he's kind of saying to shoot on the other foot.
I could lecture you too. Yeah.
With all my strength that I have. And
Yeah.
what's going on, give it back.
Yeah, I could be as indignant about this as you are if I were sitting where you're sitting. I could tell you all the things that you should now do if I wasn't suffering. And I could dismiss all your words and I could construct these wonderful speeches that you've given, which aren't giving me any comfort. And I think his real point is, don't really address the reality. You know, it's interesting. They want to say what you're saying is not real. But the truth is it was real. And so they keep denying reality themselves, and yet they say Job's denying who God really is. So basically, I think, and that comes back to something Dino said a minute ago, and that is Job is saying we need to have a deep longing to see things the way they are, not the way we imagine that they are, and to try to get behind things and understand them a little bit better. And so in those first 6 verses, now remember, they've accused him of being what? Arrogant. And so he comes back and says, well, you know, if I were in your position, it would be a lot easier to talk about this. Have you seen anything from them where they even admit, you know what, this is what we think, but we're not where you are, and we understand that? You see no sense of compassion and understanding, you know, we may not be completely objective, but this is what we think. That would have been a different approach. So let's go to the next section, and this is when Job, now he's going to get pretty aggressive here in what he's going to say and his feeling of experiencing God's wrath. So I want us to read it in chapter 16, and I'm going to begin here in verse 6 again. He says, yeah, go ahead.
One more point about
Okay, go ahead.
that it's repeated throughout. It's easy for us to get caught up in a feeding frenzy at times, and rational thought starts getting less and less frequent.
Yeah.
When we see a situation, we feed off each other. And I think that's what these friends are doing. They're kind of feeding off each other's comments and Job's response back. I think a lesson for us is to always try to keep an objective mind and not get caught up in emotion and not get caught up in the. Always keep going back and kind of resetting our thinking as we go into a situation, particularly if it's emotional.
Yeah.
That we try to keep a level head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what happens, because it seems to escalate throughout, which tends to make you think emotions are getting more and more engaged.
You know, it's almost, I've wondered before, were the friends almost competing with each other to see who could be the most piercing as things move on? Because when you read Eliphaz at the beginning, he's not nearly as aggressive initially as what some of the other friends are, like Bildad. But then it is a feeding frenzy. They do join in. And I think in their mind they've convinced themselves the harsher we can be, the more we're defending God, which is interesting because at the end, you know, God ends up rebuking them. But that's a good point. That is a good point. So now let's listen to Job. Verse 6. If I speak, my pain is not lessened. And if I hold back, what has left me? But now he has exhausted me. You have laid waste all my company. You have shriveled me up. It has become a witness, and my leanness rises up against me. It testifies to my face. His anger has torn me and hunted me down. He has gnashed at me with his teeth. My adversary glares at me. They have gaped at me with their mouth. They have slapped me on the cheek with contempt. They have masked themselves against me. God hands me over to ruffians and tosses me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, but he shattered me. And he has grasped me by the neck and shaken me to pieces. He has also set me up as his target. His arrows surround me. Without mercy, he splits my kidneys open. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks through me with breach after breach. He runs at me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth over my skin and thrust my horn in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids. Although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, do not cover my blood, and let there be no resting place for my cry. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my advocate is on high. My friends are my scoffers. My eye weeps to God. Oh, that a man might plead with God as a man with his neighbor. For when a few years are past, I shall go the way of no return. So he's very broken. And his view of God, now there's more to this picture, but his view of God, let's look at what his descriptions sound like. So when you go through chapter 17, and I want you to notice several of these things, what are some phrases that you pick up on from maybe verse 7 through 14? Is there anything that strikes you and maybe it's a little surprising to you or that you notice? Maybe language and the way he describes what he has experienced, the actions he feels have been taken against him.
Verse 9 says he hates me.
Verse 9. Let's see.
He tears me with his wrath and he hates me.
Okay, the reason that threw me is I was reading from the New American Standard Bible. It says, his anger has torn me and hunted me down. He has gnashed at me with his teeth. Is it that first clause there in verse 9 that you have that he hates?
Yeah, it says in New King James Version, it says he tears at me with his wrath and he hates me.
Oh,
He gnashes at me
okay.
with his teeth.
Okay. Which I think would be the implication of the way he feels regarding the anger. I mean, he sees God as the adversary, right? And the hunter. He sees him as he feels like the prey. And remember, God's way more powerful than he is. There's not much he can do about it. This is how he feels. And God is just hunting him down day by day, moment by moment. Okay? What else, Kelton?
Me and my Creator.
Yeah.
Totally against me. Until you get to the verse 19, he who testifies for me is on high. It's fascinating.
Well, we're going to talk about that in just a minute because that's a tough one. There's a couple of options there. But to your point, which will help us later, right now, if I just read Job, Job does not see that God is showing him any grace whatsoever, any mercy, there's none of that. And we're going to have to talk about that verse Kelton brought up. But other than that, there's not any hope, it doesn't really seem, here. If you notice this language, for instance, and I appreciate, Kelton, you saying that it was personal. It feels very personal. Remember, and we've talked about this before, but he says he wished God would stop doing what toward him? Looking at him. Just, let your eyes not be on me. Because he had come to feel that as long as God was looking at him, bad stuff was happening. He would rather God just forget all about him entirely. And maybe that would give him some sense of relief. He could just die and be done with this. Go ahead, Tommy.
It could get it personal than taking your whole family, your whole existence, just not material, but your family.
Yeah. Let's talk about how personal. So Tommy brought up, his family, his status. everything he had believed about his relationship with God. I'm sure he had thought when he had all those blessings, this is a good relationship. God is blessing me because he loves me and he looks upon me in a gracious way. But now he doesn't feel that way. So, I mean, everything has, in his mind, been taken away. Now, the truth is, God has great appreciation for Job, but of course, Job doesn't know all the background. So, less has changed about God's appreciation for Job than Job realizes. His experience is sending a message that somehow God is far away and is even hunting him down. But that's not really the entire reality. There's more involved in this account. I got a couple of hands. Alan, did you have your hand up? And I'll get you, Bill.
Some words.
Yes.
6 and 14.
Go ahead.
Pain, exhausted, shriveled, lean, hunted, mashed, glared at, gaped at, slapped, handed over to ruffians, shattered, grasped by the neck, shaken to pieces, targeted, split my kidneys, poured out my gall, broken, run at. Sounds very much like Christ.
Yeah.
But this is what he's feeling.
This, when I read that, I thought of Psalms 22, which is interesting because the way that starts, Psalms 22, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And if you go on through that, you see all of that kind of language. And then we realize that God didn't intervene to keep that from happening because of his love for us. But there's something there, I think, probably. But when you read what Job says, this is very... I'm trying to think. You don't get into the innermost part of an individual, a human being, to that language. I mean, that is just, it's me and God. It's he's hunting me down, and this is how he feels in this moment. Okay, go ahead, Billy.
I was just going to say, like to call God the enemy. Of course, he wasn't aware of Satan's role in it, but I think it's not so much that it's like I hate God.
No.
It's really more of a look at me.
Right.
Something is absolutely destroying me, and that's the only source I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which really all of his desires just say, I just want to know why is this happening.
Right. That's right. He's still hanging on to his integrity. He's still saying, I haven't been rebellious to God. So back to, and I wrote down some things that go along with what Alan mentioned, that he had felt shriveled up, desolated by his company. It's personal and violent, 16:9, which was just mentioned earlier. Abandoned and exposed, 16:10 and 11. Relentless and unceasing. Look there in verse 12. I was at ease, but he shattered me, and he has grasped me by the neck and shaken me to pieces. He has also set me up as his target. There's that target language again we saw earlier, I think around chapter 9 or so. He mentions something else I want you to see. I've mentioned this before, but it's important. He basically says, let me look. Where is the, you guys help me here. Oh, here it is, verse 14. He breaks through me with breach after breach. So, initially it was, his, the things outside of him, even when you talk about his family. But eventually, you could talk about his skin. You could talk about all of these things that he thought were hedges of protection. There is no hedge in his mind. The only limitation God has put on Satan is don't kill him, and Job wishes he would kill him right now. So everything he thought was in place that meant I'm good, it's gone in his mind. So that's the language. And yet, look at verses 15 through 17. He says, I have sewed sackcloth over my skin and thrust my horn in the dust. My face is flushed from my weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids. And although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. What is he saying still? I'm still faithful. I have been faithful. He has a clear conscience. Now look at verses 18 through 21, which is getting to the section that may be a little challenging for some. By the way, next week we'll be in chapter 17. All right, so chapter 16. In the middle of all this, there doesn't seem to be any thought that God would be doing anything to help him out of this, even though he's crying out for that. Verse 18, he says, O earth, do not cover my blood, and let there be no resting place for my cry even now. Behold, my witness is in heaven, and my advocate is on high. He says, my friends are my scoffers. My eye weeps to God. Oh, that a man might plead with God as a man with his neighbor. Now, this is a little tough in this context simply because there hasn't been any indication that he thought of God as representing him in any sense. He feels like God is the hunter and he's being hunted down. Okay? So there's no question that that's how the majority portion of this is gone. There are a couple of options. I'm okay with either one of them. What do you think he's talking about when he says, my witness is in heaven? Go ahead, Kelton.
These friends here, they don't know. There's only one person who really knows. You can have God knows the truth. He knows what's going on. He's the only one that can set what's right.
Okay, that's an option. That's right. And the way you framed it, I can see that verse. So it's possible that he's saying, the only one that could possibly be my advocate here, even though that hasn't been what I've experienced so far in his mind, realize that from Joe's perspective, would be God. Okay. Let me just throw this out, and that could well be the case, and I have been inclined to think that in the past. It just seems it's possible in his emotion that you go from one extreme to the other. And I understand that. And maybe he's just saying, look, the only hope I have would be God. I haven't experienced that yet, but it's the only possibility I've. That's one option. I think there's another option too we'll get to in a minute. But it is an option. Okay. Go ahead.
It kind of goes back to the Cain and Abel. Cain's blood, Abel's blood cried out to God. Because he went, said, where's your brother?
Uh-huh.
And I think what he's also saying, and it goes back to what Kelvin said, God is the only one that can take care of this. But my record is there.
There you go. And I think this is possible too. I think there's legitimacy in what Kelton said, that maybe God in some sense. But I want you to think about what Roger said as well. It could be that what he's saying is that the one thing that I do that is my advocate, the only thing I can imagine, because God's hunting me down and I'm his target, would simply be my innocence, and this is linked to God. God knows my record. Okay, and I think that's probably what he's saying. Okay, we'll stop there.